So today is September 21st, 2020. Who are we speaking with?
You are speaking with St. Lawrence.
How did you get that name?
Quickly, it was a name that was given to me based on the songwriting that I'd done. My career didn't start off in-house. My career started off in heavy metal. Yes, I'm not kidding about that. 37 years ago in April, which would be 37 years ago this past April, was the first time somebody paid me to play the drums. But in 1983, I was a rock musician and I wanted to play rock heavy metal drums. I wanted to be the next Alex Van Halen or whatever the black equivalent of that was going to be. And I was literally sitting in Brooklyn in Lafayette Gardens Park. I had already begun my songwriting staple because I had gotten in a band situation literally by early 1984. And the band I was with was called The Loveless. It was a heavy metal band. I was its only perceivably black member. There was a Spanish guy who was probably much closer, but he was able to pass, so he didn't let anybody really know. I knew because we can tell our own. You know how that is. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. In any case, I was sitting in a park in Lafayette Gardens in Brooklyn, and I was writing a song. And this has got to be 1986. I was already with the band over 2 years, and we had been touring and gigging all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, a lot of stuff upstate New York. And I was writing a song called Peace 2000. There were some guys playing some football nearby, and one of them threw the football to where I was sitting. When he came over, he saw what I was writing and says, "You think you're going to save the world with your poetry?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, nothing beats a failure but a try." He said, "Yeah, I get it. You think you're a saint." I went to my mom's house. I was an adult. I wasn't living at home, but I went to my mom's house, and my cousin Donnell, who was a graphic artist, he drew, a bust of my head with the giant silver ankh that I happened to be wearing at the time. It's the 1980s, come on now. And he put the words S, the ankh as the T, the bust of my head, and the name Lawrence on the sign. And he comes upstairs, and he did this in 20 minutes, and says, "This is who you are." And he shows me the drawing. And I said, "Yeah, okay." 2 days later, the band was doing press photos. And they started asking the band members' names. And everybody had whatever cool name they were using. It was like, so what's the drummer's name? And before my manager can speak up, I said, "My name is St. Lawrence." And upon saying that, everybody stopped. Because I want you to imagine 34 years ago, the only difference between then and now is that I'm fuller as an adult, but I basically look the same, just less hair. And it kind of stuck. I called ASCAP within a week, and it has been my writer's name ever since.
I love that.
That is the honest truth of how I got the name. The one thing I always tell people, I am not arrogant enough to call myself a saint. There's a quote that I always use. It's by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde says, "The only difference between saints and sinners is that saints have a past and sinners have a future." And I have a very, very checkered past. So based on that, that's how the name stuck.
That's so good. That's so good. That's so good. What is house music for those that don't know?
A question that has been asked to me and specifically T.O. Sweet. Shout out to the candy store. house music is like any other form, but we concentrate more on what the Daz band used to call danceable jazz. It's R&B riffs, jazz keyboards, it's 4-on-the-floor drums. At its core, it's jazz music to a drum beat. And now, of course, it's not that simplistic, but at its core, that's what it is for people that don't know. It is like taking a really good piece of Art Blakey jazz music and setting it to 120 beats per minute. So that's what it is at its core. It is expanded, of course, over the years. But when I got involved, we're talking mid-1987, late 1987, going into 88. It was still new for a lot of people. And it was very, very underground. That's the other key element. Most of our music, no matter how many stars we have had and how many have made it to the mainstream, we're still an underground form. That has a lot to do with who follows us. Gay people were allowed to express themselves more because of our form of music, and because they had been, or they were, people tried to push them back into the closet after the whole disco thing fell apart in the late 70s, but it never disappeared. We just defined it more. And for people that don't know, we've been around longer than hip hop. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Say that one more time so people get that.
Yeah, we've been around a lot longer. So there's a film, as you of course well know, the Maestro documentary. Shout out to Josel Ramos.
What is Maestro for those that don't know?
The Maestro documentary is a documentary that literally documents not the beginning, but the scene, the house music scene, as it relates to how it germinated and built in New York City. As well as Long Island, specifically Fire Island. And a lot of people never would understand the journey that it took to get to where it was unless they watch elements of this documentary. There are people that are in that documentary that unfortunately are no longer with us. God rest many of those souls. Francis Grasso, in fact, it was his, who technically can be credited as the first person to take two records and mix them seamlessly. It wasn't called mixing back then, it was called changes. But the whole point is that the documentary shows you how the scene built from this party on Fire Island to the Ministry of Sound, Ibiza, that whole thing. Without the start, the Sandpiper Disco out on Fire Island, and people like Tom Moulton and Francis Grasso, you wouldn't have what we have today. In fact, this is a funny point. Tom Moulton actually mastered my record for West End.
Ooh. Oh, we're gonna get
to that.
How did you discover house music?
It was through a really not weird, but odd. Todd Terry, who at the beginning of his career was a hip hop DJ, but dabbled in doing dance mixes. We're from the same neighborhood. Shout out to Coney Island, Brooklyn. He's from a place called Marlboro Projects. I'm from, I guess, what they would call Coney Island proper. I lived further out, closer to where all the, where you would normally see people living in Coney Island. But we saw each other, believe it or not, in all places in Brighton Beach. He was very popular at the time with the Russian kids who were trying to learn Black culture, and I would see him every once in a blue. And one day he probably wouldn't even remember this because of how long ago it was. We kind of acknowledged one another, and he said, I'm going to be doing some party at a place called the Peppermint Lounge, which was on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And now mind you, you'll love this part. He was late to his own party because he was busy going to the fun house to drop off a reel-to-reel to the legendary Little Louis Vega. But he finally came, and I heard his set, and I was feeling it. It was great. I loved the music. I started just seeking out all the people that actually did this because I loved the way that it didn't just sound the same. It wasn't monotonous. Sometimes it was instrumental. Sometimes it was words. There was gospel tinges to it. There, if you listen to some of the stuff by Frankie Knuckles, especially the stuff that he did with Jamie Principle, there was a whole love element to it. So it was really interesting because it was just built on all these different genres that I already heard and was like, all right, I'm kind of done. Do we have something else? The only thing that was new and fresh to me at that time was what used to be called New Wave. I guess they call it alternative now. So I was very big into Depeche Mode and still am, but I wasn't finding anything fresh from this side of the pond. So house music provided that.
Do you remember some of the first clubs you went to?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my God. It's an endless list, but I'll give you the highlights. One of the first ones, obviously, it's not obvious. I shouldn't say that. I'm a man over 50 years of age, and I am a Paradise Garage alum.
Let me stop you right there. What is Paradise Garage for those that don't know?
The Paradise Garage. What did I say in Maestro? The Paradise Garage is a legendary club that was open for 10 years between 1977 and 1987 that encapsulated, that is probably the best word I can say, the very best in house music culture. It featured a legendary DJ, DJ Larry Levan. There were other legends that played there. The Francois Kevorkian, T. Scott. These were legendary DJs. Francois is still with us, thank God. Larry and T are gone, but they set the world on fire by creating this environment. Didn't matter who you were, black, white, straight, gay, other, transgendered, before we even had a name for it. And everybody was welcome. Nobody was turned away. There were no restrictions put on who you were to enjoy this experience. The thing that brought us together was the music. And the garage represented everything I just spoke on to the degree that that club linked me to the majority of the people whom I still know today.
Describe the experience of going into the garage, from the line to the ramp to the sound.
Going up that ramp, people stood outside like like it was a whole stroke, looking for somebody to hopefully get them inside. Quite literally, the first time I went, the only reason I got in is because the guy at the door, who was, believe it or not, the Marlboro Man for a little while after Tom Moulton, Spanish brother, gay but smolderingly hot. I mean, they don't make them like that anymore. But in any case, he saw me, and because he found me attractive and cute and literally made me twirl so that he could see my entire body, and patted me on my behind and said, "Okay, Papa, you can go in." I cannot make this up, even if I wanted to. But it was an amazing experience. Once you come up the ramp and you're inside the door, you can hear the sound because you're not immediately on the floor. And then when you would go in to the crystal room, it's pitch black, and all of a sudden these lights they start to permeate everything. And the lights are in sequence with the music that you are only hearing certain bass parts to, until you physically open up that door from the crystal room, which is the one you come in through, till you get to the main floor. And it's amazing. And as soon as the music comes over you, you see this gathering of people, and they're just, if I could describe, if it could be like a scene like from the movie Caligula, it's about as close as it could get. Only difference is people are dancing. Well, at least most are. But yeah, that was my first experience with it. And I was very fortunate because I got to see legendary acts that are no longer with us that those people's careers were furthered because of this club on the west side of Manhattan in the West Village, which nobody went to unless you had to, or unless you lived there and were gay. But every Friday and Saturday night, along 7th Avenue South, over there on King Street, there was a bunch of people just kind of wandering around, hoping that they could get in.
Who were some of the acts you saw there?
Gwen Guthrie. My goodness.
What was her show?
Well, Gwen Guthrie's show was amazing. In fact, at the time, Seventh Heaven, which Larry refused, which was, of course, building the tension. Seventh Heaven was our record, meaning the party goers, the people that came to the club. The public was into Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent. But for us, it was Seventh Heaven. And he had these 7 and 8 long minute mixes and wouldn't drop her vocal. And you'd be as mad as you could be. But you'd be back that next week just to see what Larry did. And it was this, you were just always wanting for more from him. And he would give it to you. And even when Larry wasn't there, then you had T. Scott. Or you would have warm-ups by Francois Kevorkian. Or there was just this pantheon. It was, oh my God, the best DJs on the planet, And when I was there for what was called the Party of Life, which happened in May of 1984. Keith Haring, it was in celebration of Keith Haring's birthday. And Diana Ross at one point showed up. Mike Stone, who was one of the main promoters for the Garage, he walked her in. Grace Jones showed up. It was just an amazing experience. It's a whirlwind of talents, both within our community and the stars of the day. Frankie Crocker of WBLS used to broadcast live and actually bring some of the acts to the garage. In Touch, there was a song called Without You from 1987. My God. Larry and Michael Dominicus, the New York City Peach Boys. Yes, I actually got to see that performance. I guess I'm going through my memories of just the amount of people that got up on that stage and performed. Lilo Thomas, who did all these R&B hits in 1987, but they were danceable R&B hits. So there was a song called I Surrender. There was another one, Sexy Girl. The amount of talent that came through the garage literally made people's careers. Sharon Red, Beat the Street. Oh my goodness. Sharon Brown, I Specialize in Love.
Wow.
Yeah,
that
had to be 1985. Yeah, 1985, 1986. Yeah, so yeah, I was there during that really heavy period between late 1983 and late 1985, when you would see all these people. Early 1986, things began to change. There were internal politics, which I'm clearly not going to, I'm not even going to get into them. But I started exploring other house music clubs other than the garage. Because there were other things going on at the time, absolutely. There was an entire scene. And it was kind of like, if you don't know, you don't know. You know, the Red Zone was a legendary club on the west side of Manhattan off of 14th Street. This is I'm not even talking about 90s yet, but still in the late 80s. You had the World, which was on the east side. You had, in fact, it was in the Alphabets. You had a place called Save the Robots, which was the bottom half of Avenue B. In fact, Save the Robots wasn't even a legal club when they first opened it. They just opened it and we just was there. And then the scene kind of got splintered after the garage closed in 87. And it depended on who you knew, what groups you were with, and where they moved to. People started doing their own functions. There was a large segment, especially with Black and brown people, excuse me, that went to Brooklyn, and we started our own scenes. Shout out to Kim Lightfoot with Bridge Street and another place called Afterlife. Shout out to DJ Mansky for BCD, Behind Closed Doors. There was an entire scene that was built in Brooklyn in response to the garage closing. We came back to Manhattan at some point. The early 90s brought us the legendary Shelter, which of course you well know.
What is Shelter?
Shelter is a club that had its entrance. Everybody knew the entrance as 6 Hubert Street, which is in the Tribeca section of Manhattan. It was also considered an underground club, though it was owned by a very nice man named Howard Rower, who loved the idea of people partying together. He owned the building and he allowed these parties to take place. He was an incredibly generous landlord, especially to put up with us. It was a one-level club. Large, cavernous, dark, everything that you want in a dark house music club. Great, amazing sound system. Legendary DJs made their fortunes there. And I'll just mention a few. Timmy Regisford, Merlin Bob. Wow, I could go on. There were people's entire careers that were made in that place. Shelter was, in essence, our haven. Shout out to Boy Jarvis. God rest his soul, sleep in power. There, people say or have said on one occasion or another that I resemble or sound like another legendary house music producer. In fact, he's one of the progenitors of what we ended up calling hard house. He, for me, is the legendary spoken word artist. He's a spoken word artist in house. I mean, he's done instrumentals just like everybody else, and he's a musician and he's a great DJ himself. Oh my God, why am I going blank on his name? Because I'm getting old.
Basil?
That's right. That's right. That's exactly it. DJ Basil. Now, I know Basil quite well. We don't look alike. He's lighter than I am, but that's
You don't look like it at all. At all. You don't look like it at all.
Right. But people associated the voice, the timbre, and because I was always with, a lot of the times I hung out with the thugs of house music. Who were the thugs of house music? From New York, the first person you get is Todd Terry. Then you get Kenny Dope. Then you go to Chicago and you got Terry Hunter. These guys literally hung out together, and if you saw them walking down the street, they would literally look like a bunch of thugs who happened to make dance music. It's ridiculous, but they're really all nice guys. They just look very imposing when you meet them in person. I've known these people most of my life. 30 years for most of them. Louis Vega himself. I met Louis in 1989, 88, somewhere around there. I took a break from music because of the stock market crash of 1987, so I served in the military. Thankfully, by the time I went, I had already put out my first record. It wasn't put out here, unfortunately. It was a release in Japan. But by the time I came back, thank God I got back and had all my faculties. I continued on. I did a lot of session work. And I didn't get a bite at the apple from my first record for about 6 years. And the second time I got my bite at the apple it was already 1994. And by then, a whole new generation, 90s house, became the imprint of New York-based house music. At that point, we were truly the leaders by the early to mid 90s. It was a really prolific period and quite literally created a lot of legends. DJ Pierre, the Wild Pitch Parties. Then you had the whole Jersey crew from Zanzibar. You know, there was an entire not genre. There was an entire underground club system happening in Newark, New Jersey. And it produced its own stars. One of those stars is Kerry Chandler, Jovan, Chevelle, and of course, they were all brought out by our legend from that era. Who is he? Come on now.
Tony Humphreys.
That's right. Tony Humphreys was our
god.
Our connection to that side.
Yeah.
He was our connection to that side. He brought, in fact, all of those people I mentioned before Tony, because of Tony, we ended up all connecting to each other. And and to this day, we're all still out here, you know. And I have to first, I want to make sure that I'm clear. A lot of these legends, not just Louis Vega, but Tony Humphreys, Kerry Chandler, Jovan, all of these guys made it possible for the little guy. Blaze, another perfect example. Josh Milan, they're all from Jersey. And they made it possible for guys like me. And I can't thank them enough for their contribution. And their contribution still goes on even now.
What is Zanzibar?
Zanzibar is a club was a club in Newark, New Jersey that was very much underground and near the same time as the Garage was open. It represented New Jersey house, for those that did not know. Dennis Farrar, you know, a lot of what Tony Humphreys brought out. He was the head shop at the club. It was another major underground place, another major underground proving ground. That's the best way to say it. And he did in Jersey what the Garage and all the places in New York was doing in New York.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
He created not the same vibe. It was because it's Jersey, so it was different, but it kept the scene alive. And his club wasn't like the Garage in the circumstance and the pomp, but the music. Just because of the music, it kept the scene viable. It kept us connected. It kept us involved in what we were doing. And not just what we were doing, but what we were helping to keep or helping to create. I guess that's the easiest way to say it.
Describe the Jersey sound.
Most people will tell you to describe the Jersey sound, all you got to do is listen to Kerry Chandler. Kerry Chandler is New Jersey, okay? Kerry Chandler is a legendary house music producer who defined a very specific drum sound. I don't know that I could describe it other than it's akin to what Teddy Riley created with the New Jack sound. Kerry made this very distinct drum pattern that is almost as recognizable as Teddy Riley's New Jack drum sound. That drum sound it didn't matter who you were in Jersey as a producer, at some point, you were either going to imitate or recreate Kerry's drum sounds. In fact, his drum sounds were so legendary that New York producers have either imitated or recreated and then gave their own little spin to.
That's deep.
Yeah, that's Kerry Chandler. That's Kerry Chandler.
Now, did you go to the Zanzibar as well?
Yes, I did.
So compare and contrast the vibe and the crowd in Zanzibar versus the Paradise Garage.
The garage's crowd was, well, first of all, it was larger because it was just a larger space. But Zanzibar's crowd was a very loyal following. It was an incredibly loyal following, just like the garage. Zanzibar was almost a not a stopgap. It was almost like a stepping off point. It's like, if you couldn't make it to the big New York club, you could probably get to Zanzibar, provided you were not scared to go to Newark, New Jersey in the late 1980s at 2 o'clock in the morning. But once you got there, it was just as welcoming. It was just as fanatical as far as the crowd's belief in their DJ. That's something that I feel that the newer generation, they love their DJs, which is wonderful, and I see Tiesto's numbers and stuff like that, but you don't have the same camaraderie in that setting that you would have at a place like Zanzibar or the Garage or Shelter or Sound Factory Bar. The people, we knew each other. We took care of each other. We would go to breakfast after the club, after things at the club were over. We would, we stayed in each other's houses. We made music together. It wasn't about just one superstar DJ. It was about an entire group of people who broke bread together. And I mean that literally, so that's, to me, what the newer guys didn't or don't possess. The closest we've come is Body and Soul, and that's, first of all, that's much later anyway, but that's what I would say is the contrast of the two as far as the clubs. They were both fanatical in their belief, but the Garage was more colorful, we'll say. Zanzibar was, let's get straight to the point.
Mm. And describe the music that was played in both clubs.
The music played at both. Larry was much more freehand. Larry would play Black Betty, where Tony, he didn't stick to a format, but he stuck to genre. He would find things, if he found something outside of the genre, he would turn it into or mix it in such a way that it was part of the genre of house. Whereas Larry wouldn't necessarily do that. Larry experimented with everything. Tony experiments also, but Tony is much more structured than Larry. T, as in T. Scott, T was even more structured. Even though he played with Larry, he was more structured than he was. Larry was just much more experimental. In fact, the reason the Peach Boys, I was there for the performance. Larry got up out of a coffin as part of the performance. There was costumes. Like I said, Garage, colorful, pomp, circumstance. Zanzibar, good vibe. Let's get straight to the point.
Mm. What is the candy store?
Memories, brother, memories.
I think that's how we met too, by the way.
Yes, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. Shout out to T.O. Sweet, who, by the way, is up in Connecticut, and I'll definitely tell him that I spoke to you. The candy store is a radio show. A radio show that was on for more than 11 years, if memory serves correct. From 10:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. every Monday night. So you'd get through your great weekend, your Friday, your Saturday, your Sunday, party. And it was this little radio station out of NYU that broadcast enough of a signal, and if you had a good enough antenna, you could get it. It was a show that showcased the best and most prominent, as well as the least known. He was very good about that, of showcasing in house music. And I am a definite beneficiary of that show. T.O. Sweet, Rio the Aviator, and Sir Lance. And these three men, all different vibes, created an incredibly devoted following of listeners. It was an incredible radio show that featured interviews, live performances of DJs oftentimes. In fact, in some cases, even actual live performance of artists as well as interviews. They had fun. I created music with T.O. Sweet at the candy store. In fact, I did one of their vocal drops. Oh God, a lifetime ago, 20 years ago? Yeah, 2000. It became really well known because of what we had discussed at the time. At the time, T.O. Sweet felt like people were calling stuff house music that wasn't house music. And he made it very clear that here at TCS, we're gonna give you house, but I came up with the concept. I was on the show one night and I literally said, sometimes you have to rename to reclaim. And he jumped on that. And from that comment, we started to call what we were doing New Soul. And part of that New Soul, we had to make sure to explain it to people. He literally kept me at the store one night after the show was over. It was 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. I had fallen asleep. He knew that I fell asleep. He wakes me up. He's like, yo, Saint, we ready to do this? I said, what are we doing? He goes, say the words that you did. And I said, okay. Now I'm still half asleep. And I literally say, do you know house? And that started it all. And literally the drop, he interspliced interviews, jazz scatting, live jazz scatting by Jocelyn Brown. And he literally then had me say, TCS presents New Soul for 2000. Although the name has changed, the vibe remains the same. And through that, it actually influenced people to look at house music, because we decided we weren't going to bring in all the more progressive stuff. We were like, no. We already have an art form here. We respect the others. Never disrespect to the others. But this is ours. And we want to express this. This was ours. And I always loved him for that. And to this day, that brother is still the same. He is no nonsense. He is the executive producer, in fact, on one of my full-length albums from 2007. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. We have some history. This is beyond the candy store. So,
what is West End Records?
West End Records was, because unfortunately they are defunct now, but West End Records was the premier dance music label, probably from the early to mid 70s through the early to mid 2000s. At the time that I was signed, the first time we interviewed, I was probably its first new artist because they had been doing a lot of reissues at the time that I was signed. I was his first new artist in about a decade. And they were responsible for a lot of the records that came out of the garage. Loose Joints, Is It All Over My Face? Don't Make Me Wait by the Peach Boys. Some really legendary records came from West End, especially the early ones. Even before house music really was considered or called house music, West End is responsible. They basically are responsible, between them and Prelude Records, are responsible for what we know as house music in New York City. And I am an actual beneficiary because I was signed to West End 19 years ago. Like I said, I was probably its first new artist in about 10 years when I was signed. My record, which was the Internal Society Volume 1, featured remixes by the legendary Andre Collins, also of Better Days. Shout out to Andre. He's doing well also, by the way.
I just
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just interviewed him, by the way.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Last week. It was great. It's coming soon.
Yeah, but yeah, like I said, Andre's mixed several of my records, and I ended up co-producing with him his very first release, which was back in 2009. Yeah. In fact, his release is the 7th release off of the label I owned at the time, Zone 7 Entertainment.
Who is Andre Collins, for those that don't know?
Andre Collins is a legendary DJ remixer and now producer, add to his credits, who made his mark initially at a club called Better Days, which was the late 1980s. He also played the Saturday parties at Sound Factory Bar when in the mid-90s. He eventually became the head jock and got world renowned at a club called The Warehouse. And for almost 10 years, at the edge of the Bronx, 140th Street, between Grand Concourse and Walton, he was the music maestro that brought prominence to the Bronx. I absolutely believe in that, because his sound literally had us having international traffic. People would leave LaGuardia Airport, get into a cab, and come to the warehouse with their luggage. And the only thing they knew was 2 things. They would say, warehouse, asking the question to make sure that they were in the right place, or they would say, Andre Collins. And if they heard his name, they were coming inside. So his world renowned. I mean, people knew him for Better Days. People knew him from the Mark Ballroom. He's got a legendary list. He's been a Shelton DJ. He's got a legendary pedigree. But the Warehouse brought him to world renown.
What is Better Days?
Better Days was a club in Midtown, believe it or not. It was in the high 40s. I believe it was 48th Street. No, I'm sorry, 50th Street. It's 50th Street. That after the garage closed, as I told you earlier, a lot of the garage crowd had splintered, went to different places. Well, the same went for the DJs as well. T. Scott, who roamed around a little bit, but found a home. Bruce, I forgot his last name.
Forrest?
That's right. Thank you. Bruce Forrest owned the actual club. He hired T. T then immediately turned around and got Andre. And between the two of them, they built a following. Because at the time, Andre Collins was already at a place called Midtown 43. And Midtown 43, most of Midtown 43's crowd, as it started to close down, ended up following Andre to better days. And when T either wasn't available or was dealing with his own issues, Andre was there, and Andre's following never left him. In fact, they followed him from better days because it was a legendary club. In fact, two of my uncles, in fact, one of the uncles actually taught me to play the drums. He was the head of security. And now, you know, I remember your comment, and this is a side comment, but the friendly security face of our time, well, my uncle who worked at Better Days is the person that got me into club security. So, yes, I have a pedigree when it comes to that as well. My uncle, Brian, was the head of security at Better Days. My other uncle, his name is Doug. Doug was the head bartender at Better Days. When I first came to Better Days, I was completely intimidated by Andre Collins, and Andre does not suffer fools. So if you're all timid, he's just gonna let you have it and tell you to go sit down. So I've known his pedigree since about 1988, 89. We didn't become good friends until after Sound Factory Bar, probably at Shelter, which eventually became Club Vinyl. We became good friends by then. And because of that, we've continued that friendship 25 years now. 1995 to now. And we ended up working together because of that friendship.
What is Sound Factory Bar?
Sound Factory Bar was a club on 21st Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. It occupied the space that used to be called, before it was Sound Factory Bar, it was called Private Eyes. Private Eyes was a scene and B-scene club that a lot of Black stars used to hang out at. In fact, God rest the dead, the guy that was on The Sopranos, James Gandolfini, he was the manager at Sound Factory Bar when it became Sound Factory Bar. But he was a holdover from when it was called Private Eyes. Wow. And it was a split level club, and it had different themes for almost every day of the week, almost every day of the week, except for Tuesday. Monday, there was a DJ by the name of Troy Parrish. It was a party called Sugar Babies. Tuesdays, it was closed. That's when they took care of their internal business. Wednesdays, of course, is the Underground Network with Barbara Tucker and Don Welch, featuring, of course, Little Louie Vega. Thursdays was a party called Factoria with DJ, producer, the legendary Lord G. Fridays, by that point in time, Frankie Knuckles had come back to New York from Chicago, and he had a party there called Frankie Knuckles Fridays. They didn't have a party initially for the weekend. They did have a Sunday party, which was run by Charles Jackson. And it featured Danny Krevitt, the legendary Danny Krevitt. And downstairs from Danny was Andre Collins. And then, because they did so well on Sundays, they gave him Saturdays. So we ran the entire weekend. I was at the club at least 3 times a week. I worked on Mondays for Troy. I worked on Wednesdays for Barbara. And I worked on Saturdays for Charles Jackson. And because I was there so often, obviously I got to know everybody else during the other functions. But it was legendary that they were able to literally each day was a different crowd. Sugar Babies had a very East Village, young kids with the modified hair, but the love of one thing in common. Whatever type of house music that particular DJ played, there was a crowd for it. Wednesdays, Barbara Tucker, Little Louis Vega. It was he was our star. He is our star. Thursdays was a much more Spanish view of house music. Lord G, Factoria, and I should mention that at the same time there was another party called Café con Leche, which Lord G also ran. And he was the head DJ for that. That was further into Midtown. But Sound Factory Bar, which was on 21st Street, basically in, I guess they call it the Flatiron District. In fact, it was the only place like it for 5 years straight. From, basically 1990 to 1994. There was one other club that opened up toward the end, and it was called Central Fly, and it opened up down the block from Sound Factory Bar. But by that point, we were already looking to greener pastures. Greener and Central Fly had its own star, the late Eric Murillo, and he had his own vibe, which was a mixture of the Spanish along with the deep house, and his was much more of a I guess a Hollywood vibe, whereas Sound Factory Bar was much more of a underground New York vibe. If you went to Central Fly, you needed to be really dressed, or you should have been, because you would feel out of sorts. Sound Factory Bar, not so much. We had our own thing. But
what is the Loft?
Wow. The Loft is was. Peace, Sleep in Power, David Mancuso. The Loft, literally, its original location, 576 Broadway. Incidentally, the very first place that the Real World was shot, the very first Real World, was literally David Mancuso's home, which is why it's called The Loft, because it took place in a loft. This is literally, it's not a figure of speech. It literally took place inside of his loft. He decided, and that's the Soho, it was the Soho section of Manhattan. He decided he wanted to have a club where he had all types of people, didn't matter who you were. Now, there was a very distinct difference about the Loft from, say, the Garage and other places like it. The Loft was a true dancer's democracy. It didn't matter who you were, how you dressed, what you looked like. If you were a dancer and you had the moves, you were welcome at the Loft. Other places relied on pomp and circumstances, as I said before. The Loft did not. The Loft was very plain, very few decorations. By the time I got to the Loft, because the Loft takes you all the way back to 1976, and even with me being in my mid-50s, even I'm too young for that. I got to the Loft somewhere around 1983. By then, because of our city, its mayor's rules about where you could hold parties and stuff like that, the Loft had already moved by then to 99 Prince Street. And even then, They had a giant bowl. You would pay, I think it was $7.99. And I kid you not, there was a bowl of pennies. Well, you could take back your penny if you wanted it. I'm not kidding you. David left a giant glass bowl of pennies. I think it was his way to thumb his nose at establishment rules for clubs. No alcohol. Like I said, the Loft was a true dancer's democracy. Body and Soul had a kid who called himself Loft Kid Lewis. And Loft Kid Lewis, Archie Burnett, who was the house father, the legendary house father of the House of Ninja, they have some amazing fond memories and stories. I didn't go to the Loft as much, but my memories of it from when I went, when it was at 99 French Street, the thing I loved about it, the thing that was the most incredible about it, is that it was, at its core, it was a place for you to come out to dance, to learn from other dancers, to trade moves with other dancers, to feel and express yourself through dance strictly for that purpose. That's it. There was no other reason to go to the Loft, and I'll always treasure that. It was an amazing place.
What would you say would be like a Loft anthem?
A Loft anthem. Wow. I would say Sesamato, which is a track that that Francois did. But a Loft anthem for me, it came out way after the Loft was over. But it's a track by a group calling themselves Soft House Company. And the track, there's an A and B side. One track is called A Little Piano. The other side is called What You Need. And they're two Italian guys who did minute vocals on the track, you know, just enough so that you know the name of the song. And for A Little Piano, there's no, it's just the music. And there are long form versions of this track. And when I hear this, the only thing you can do is dance. It is made exclusively for dancers. And it's up-tempo. A Little Piano still gives you that jazzy feel with the piano chord structure. What You Need gives you that heightened effect from the horns and the effects. And it just pumps you up. Now, for me, it would be a Loft anthem, but old school Loft anthems, to be honest with you, for me, the old school Loft anthem is a track by, believe it or not, by Eddie Kendrick from The Temptations. And baby, girl, you need a change of mind. Yeah, it's, he did a long form version and mixed it, so it must be about 9 minutes long. The track was done in like 1973 when Eddie Kendrick actually originally produced it. It became so synonymous with the Loft, and David hadn't done anything to it yet. But I would have to say by 1977, 1978, it was in heavy rotation at the Loft, and Eddie Kendrick had already done 3 other albums at that point, from that point in time. But Baby, You Need to Change Your Mind by Eddie Kendrick is definitely a Loft anthem. But for modern day folks, Soft House Company, A Little Piano, or What You Need, either one will work. Or excuse me, either one of those 3 for me, true law fan.
What is Bonds International?
Wow. Bonds International. Mike Stone, a legendary promoter from the garage. There was a store in Times Square. I'm guessing it went out of business at some point. And it literally was turned into a dance space by the legendary promoter, Mike Stone. And subsequently, Mike Stone also was the legendary promoter that brought us the Warehouse as well, along with Charles Dax. But Bonds International brought us another superstar from the underground, Mr. Kenny Carpenter. And Kenny Carpenter is another legendary DJ from the pantheon of Andre Collins. And I've known Kenny, hell, as long as I've known Andre, possibly longer. Because of his legendary status at Bonds. I, shockingly enough, was too young for Bonds. But I knew about it. I knew of it because at the time that I did come out, they were during the early days of the garage, they were still around, but they could not outlast what was beginning to happen to Times Square in the mid 80s, because even though Giuliani hadn't taken office yet, the gentrification of Times Square was already starting to show and rear its head. And it's not, I can't necessarily say it's a bad thing or a good thing. It was just something that happened. And because it was something that happened, Bonds could not withstand that change. Having a Black gay male run a club where he had peoples in costumes and, you know, half-naked men running around a club at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And they already had enough problems with the other vices in Times Square. They certainly weren't going to completely stand that, especially if they weren't being given a little something to look the other way. We'll say that. But Bonds was legendary, and if nothing else, like I said, Bonds gave us Kenny Carpenter, and I am so thankful that they did.
What is Studio 54?
Wow. Nicky Siano. Studio 54 is a club that was on 54th Street in Manhattan. It was run by the famous hotelier, Ian Schrager, and his partner was a guy named Steve Rebell. It opened up a year before the garage did. It was truly, if it had lasted, it would have truly been New York's version of a Hollywood premier nightclub. Nicky Siano, a legendary DJ from our scene, who used to be the head DJ at a club called The Gallery, which influenced Andre Collins, in fact. Andre used to go to The Gallery as a teenager himself and listen to Nicky's stylings. Nicky Siano was the head jock at Studio 54. Studio 54's heyday was 76 to mid 78. By late 78, unfortunately, because Steve Rebell did not know how to keep his mouth closed, he talked too much to the media. So by 1978, unfortunately, the party was over. If memory serves, it was something about tax evasion. and the amount of cash that the club was holding. It was very messy. The two of them, both Steve and Ian, both ended up going to prison for a couple of years, but it's not, that wasn't the end of them. It ended the club's superstar status. And when I say superstar status, Michael Jackson went to Studio 54, Cher went to Studio 54, Mick Jagger went to 54. It was for the stars. In fact, the group Chic, because they could not get in to Studio 54, two of their biggest hits, and this is from the mouth of Nile Rodgers. Nile said that they couldn't get in. They had already done, I believe they had already done the song Good Times. Steve did not let them in for whatever the reason was. Their studio was down the block from 54. The night that they couldn't get in, Nile Rodgers, the guitarist, Bernard Edwards, the bassist, they went into their studio. Nile was angry and literally started a song based on a groove that Bernard Edwards started called Fuck 54. That was what it was originally. Bernard turned around and said, we can't do that. We can't put this out. So Fuck 54 turned into Freak Out. Once they completed that track, all of a sudden they became darlings again. And of course they got into 54, of course. But Nile Rodgers himself had imparted that story. And it was, it definitely gave me the like, oh, don't make artists like that mad. They might make a song about your club. But at any rate, Studio 54, it was whereas the garage was underground, and you didn't, even though the garage would broadcast live, it was still black and brown. Studio 54 was where the white glitterati would go.
What is the warehouse?
Now you're coming to my memories. The warehouse was a split level club, as I had mentioned before, at the edge of the Bronx. It was located at East 140th Street between the Grand Concourse and Walton Avenue. It was off of the Major Deegan Expressway, and it was a split-level club that could probably fit about 1,600 people, and it even had an outdoor deck, a private outdoor deck. From 1997 until about 2005, it was the premier black gay club, or at least that was what it was promoted as. Everybody was welcome at the warehouse. I was the events liaison, and I also ran the guest list at the warehouse. I helped out with security, of course, but Andre Collins was the head jock the entire time. Other legendary DJs have played up there. In fact, every legendary DJ we've spoken of so far, from Frankie Knuckles to Louis Vega, T.O. Sweet, in fact, the candy store, I should say. My goodness. Francois Kevorkian, Kenny Carpenter, all of them have paid homage at the warehouse. It is Andre Collins' roost, we'll say. His driving sounds and his status promoted that club to world renown. And I mean that literally. I was there the entire time as well. In fact, I had done my first release on my own label was played by Andre at that club. My first release was an EP called Tribal Drums Along the Skyline. And Andre mixed songs on that record as well and played it subsequently, those mixes, at the Warehouse. It was a legendary club. The Warehouse was an all-inclusive one. You could go to the Warehouse and dance, drink, eat. They had an outdoor deck, so smoking, you could do that without leaving the physical club. It was amazing. The Warehouse is also responsible for a lot of notice to the Bronx. Black Pride, which is Black Gay Pride, because of the Warehouse, got notice. And in 1997, we got the first float at the first Black Gay Pride. So many groups were able to not legislate is the wrong word, were able to proliferate POCC, people of color in crisis, because we did a lot of advocacy because of the Warehouse. So there was a lot of advocacy and awareness about the AIDS crisis in minority communities. The Warehouse helped bring notice to a lot of that because of its status as a club. We've had legendary artists up there too. Just to name one, believe it or not, Queen Pen actually performed at the Warehouse. Yes, Barbara Tucker, legendary vocalist, she performed at the Warehouse. There've been so many, and you have to remember, for me, this is low end 15 years, high end 23 years ago for me. We've hosted some of the biggest parties in the city because our club had the capacity to do it. For the first 3 years before 9/11, we hosted a minimum of 800 people a week, every week. That was minimum. That wasn't like, that was our low number was like 750. High numbers went up into the thousands. Gay Pride, it would be 15, 16, 1,700 people. We literally would have to move people out in waves. It was an incredible party place with an amazing sound system, and had two different genres of music. Andre Collins, deep house, classics up on the main floor, which was upstairs. Downstairs, when you first entered the club, we had DJs like DJ Unknown, DJ MK, and it was an entire hip hop vibe. So we served both communities. And it was and everybody got along. It was an amazing place. Unfortunately, 9/11 and like anything else, internal politics or just simply the changing of gentrification also didn't unfortunately help the Warehouse also. So by 2000, we were a year and a half literally off of the Garage's record. So basically from May of 1997 to about September of 2005, we were there, right there every week.
Wow. What is Club Vinyl?
Club Vinyl is what the club was eventually. No, let me go back. Club Vinyl has been many things. It has had several different names, and At one point, it was literally called B Square, which was literally somebody came up with the idea of making a club for suits. I don't know what they were playing there, but it was literally called B Square. At one point, it did have a very good run as a club called Area. The official name of Club Vinyl was given somewhere around the mid-1990s. And Shelter, who was there originally 1990, 1991, 92, unfortunately, something must have happened with the legalities of the club itself, and I guess the owner, Howard Rower, God rest his soul, wasn't able to sustain the party. But by 1995, Shelter, hosted by Club Vinyl, came back. So Club Vinyl was the actual name of the physical club. They had various parties there, but the actual name of the club has always been Vinyl. The official address would be 157 Hudson Street. Everybody came in through 6 Hubert Street, which was around the corner. It is like I said, a dark cavernous club. It's a large place though. Holds almost 1,400 people. We've had legendary performances at Vinyl because of the New Eurekan Soul Band. Tito Puente has played there. We have had legendary hip hop parties. Vinyl has hosted every major function for almost every genre. That is hip hop, reggae, house. We've done everything at Club Vinyl from the time it opened, where Shelter was reintroduced in 1995, November of 95 to be exact, until early 2002, maybe 5-6 months after 9/11, it ceased operations. 9/11 affected it greatly because people weren't physically allowed to come into the area.
That's my next question. What effect did 9/11 have on nightlife in New York City?
Oh my God, it killed it. Well, the easiest explanation is that what happened to nightlife in New York City after 9/11, what 9/11 did was cause the United States as itself to become gun shy. The last time the United States was attacked was Pearl Harbor. So from 1941 to 2001 is 60 years. The US has not had to deal with an attack on that level. Never mind the fact that they tried to blow up the World Trade Center in 1999 from the basement. Nobody thinks about that. But somehow, what was that, 1999, 98, whenever it was?
I think it was 93.
I'm sorry, you're right, 93. It was 93, I'm sorry, my bad. It was 93. Nobody thinks about that. But once 9/11 happened, it fundamentally changed how what changed was freedom of movement. That's the easiest way to say it. People became afraid or fearful of other people, especially if you looked like us. So I don't talk about just Black people, but Black and brown people. And between 9/11 and gentrification of Tribeca, which is where Vinyl was located, it wasn't allowed to sustain because it could not get the audience that was used to coming there because people would not come out. They were afraid, literally. In fact, it wasn't just Club Vinyl, it was several clubs. There was a club that was further down.
Wetlands. Wetlands?
Well, that was on the same street, but not just Wetlands, but there was a club in the opposite direction going toward Worth Street, which was called Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit also was affected by it because people were simply afraid to gather for fear that someone would try to blow the place up. Now, the fear only worked for developers because now they could get more money from people that did not care about the culture that was being built around these places. It was all about how much can I sell this for? Howard's sons, because Howard unfortunately passed away in 2000, his sons sold the club because they considered it a headache. They did not appreciate the culture of the club, whereas Howard loved the culture. He believed in it, but his sons did not. So between 9/11, gentrification, fear, quite literally, Giuliani's quality of life campaign from the late 90s also affected nightlife because it started moving us. When people with money said, "Oh my God, I do not want these people." Now I don't have to explain to you who these people are. So that was also one of the proverbial nails in the coffin. Nightlife was being moved to such outskirts that people were fearful just to go to the places where this entertainment was taking place, which killed business. Body and Soul, the perfect example of that. They were fortunate. They were able to take their entire culture and quite literally package it and take it on the road, which is what they do to this day, from what I'm to understand. What I'm to understand, they do. They literally take it on the road and have taken it to several different countries.
What is Body and Soul?
Body and Soul started out as a Sunday afternoon tea dance. Now, an origin of a tea dance is basically was just a gay function, and they would get together on a Sunday afternoon because it was not scrutinized by the authorities, who would, if the authorities scrutinized you and it was at night, it would make it harder for you. So they would come out on a Sunday in the afternoon, which is why it was called a tea dance. It was like going to Sunday tea. You wouldn't get as much fever from the authorities. What happened is that Body and Soul, which started out in this way, the original name of Body and Soul is the Midas Touch. And it was basically older club heads, myself included, that just did not want to be in a club with a bunch of kids on a Saturday night. Because they didn't know the culture. Our culture from when we did it, we were getting older. We did not want to party with people 25 years younger than us. We wanted something for our own. It started off that way. The three DJs and its promoter, John Davis, turned it into a world phenomenon by simply giving the people what they wanted. Literally, you would come into Body and Soul. When it first started, it started at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 8 o'clock it was over. They knew they had to move it because not enough people were being able to come. And it went from 12 to 2. So 2, basically 12 to 8, it went from that to 2 to 10. But then that wasn't enough. So they then moved it 3 to 11. But apparently people kept coming later and later. So they moved it one more hour. It became 4 p.m. to 12 o'clock in the night. Francois said, it is just enough time for you to come out, dance, have your church, go home, and get up and go to work the next day. And he was absolutely right. Once they got to the 4 to 12 hour, that seemed to be the linchpin that made it completely work. And for 6 years, September of 1996 to early 2002, uh, they had their party every Sunday without fail, with the exception of the Sunday after 9/11, of course, because nobody could come into the area unless you physically live there. So there was no way to give the party, which is, like I said, 9/11 changed the entire landscape of New York City. That included the warehouse, because things changed at the warehouse. Even though the warehouse was so far north, it didn't matter. 9/11 changed the complex culture of nightlife overall.
Mm. Talk to me about promoters. You've been around them and you've seen how they've done lots of different parties. What are common mistakes promoters make that you saw in your eyes? Were like, I wouldn't do shit that way. You don't have to name names. Just give us examples.
No, and I wouldn't, because I have respect for those people. But some of the common mistakes they have is some of the aggressive behaviors. There's no reason to constantly be shoving a flyer at someone. Some of the most legendary promoters, people came to them to find out when the next party was happening. So one of the things that I wouldn't do is I would create a small following if it were me, and then wait for those people to tell others, and then have those people follow me. So they would be looking for, either in person or on the net, for me to find out what's happening. That's one. Another mistake, they try to promote to you while you're physically partying, which is ridiculous. Do you know the amount of flyers that are wasted on a club dance floor because promoters are walking up to you, giving you flyers while you're already partying somewhere? It's a big no-no. Another is knowing your crowd or knowing your fans. It's always good to build your fan base beyond whomever it is. But it's just as important to have those fans tell two friends. Because if you're building and you have a brand and a product, then if the product is good, the people who are first interested in your product will tell their friends about your product, and thereby having them come to you to, hey, do you have something for me? So that's another mistake. The third one that I'll mention, a lot of promoters, they don't know the geographical locations that they are in. I understand that they need to go where the people are. I really do. I really, really do. However, don't go to some place where people are getting off work. Because what happens is that they don't really want to talk to you. They want to go home. They want to, the easiest thing is to find people who are already out enjoying themselves. They're out having dinner. They're out for drinks. They're out with friends. If you get people getting on a train, coming home from work at 5 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday, they're gonna be, what? What is, they're gonna look at you, leave me alone. But if you're out and it's 8:30 and you're in Midtown and you see a group of friends who are out enjoying each other's company, yeah, I'd say approach that, especially if they're part of your demographic that you're trying to promote to. But leave working people alone because they're working. And also know your crowd. Don't promote to me. You know me. Why are you promoting something to me? Email me, fine. You want to tell me about something? Email me. I'm a producer. I'm in the scene. Most of the promoters know the people in the scene. Now, granted, I'm not a superstar DJ by any measure. And I have thought about it, and maybe at some point I may try it. But I am a producer. I am known. I've been around more than 35 years. Why are you giving me flyers? Why would you walk up and give somebody like Tyrone Francis a flyer? Email him. Why would you go out and give somebody like Adam Scott and I'm purposely naming these guys because these are the B-tier guys, but we're still known and we're still in the scene. Oftentimes we've been there longer than the promoters themselves. So if you want our friends to know about it, email me. I'll send it out. But don't bombard me with a bunch of flyers when you see me leaving earlier from the club. It usually means that either A, I have business to take care of, B, I'm possibly going to the studio, C, I'm going to another spot. So if you want to tell me about something, hey, Saint, let me get your email. I want to throw something at you. Maybe you can send it out to your people. Cool. I give you my email. I keep going. You keep going. Those, to me, are some of the mistakes that I've seen.
And then talk to us about what's the proper way to manage a guest list, and what are common mistakes people use in managing a guest list?
Well, first of all, from the side of the people who are formulating the guest list, the main mistake is that changes are inevitable because people sometimes will do things that you do not expect. People will pop up, as people say. There should be a specific reasoning for the guest. If they're a guest of the promoter because the promoter is trying to promote another function or trying to bring in new blood to keep the club going, I understand that. But that does not require you to invite 10 people to do that. You can invite 3. A common mistake is people believing they're on the guest list. Let's face it, Little Lewis did it when he did Club Lonely. Charles, I'm on the list. No. The fact that you have to tell somebody that you're on the list probably means that you're not. Now, what I have always tried to do, when I ran the guest list at the warehouse, when I would get there, usually I already had a notebook that had names, and I would tell the promoters, write down your preliminary list. Once I got there, before people really started coming, what I would do is I would then go through it and say, okay, this person, this person, this person. Why? Meaning the main promoters first, take care of them first, because they're keeping the patronage. But then your street team sometimes will have that. That's fine, but they need to be limited. You cannot, because we still are in the business to make money. So I would limit the amount. We would literally talk about how many people, based on what you believe, we'll do as far as our numbers. What percentage of that can be afforded free passage or reduce? Because a lot of times what will happen is you do reduced passage. So one person will be free, and then their guest will get reduced fare to get fare, reduced patronage to get into a place. That's also a wonderful way, because what happens is that people are still spending money. Again, we're in the business to make money. That does not mean that there aren't people that are always on a list, because their presence, their mere presence, brings business to us. So yes, that part is always going to be part of it, and that will never change. But you should always truncate it to how much of this is going to net me more later. How much, and that more has to be determined what that more will be, whether it's monetary, whether it's notoriety, whether it's whether it's promotion so that you can take your function on the road, which Warehouse has done. We went to the Edge in DC and promoted our function there, and it was wonderful. They treated us wonderfully. But again, those are some of the factors that go into properly running a guest list.
So for a club like the Warehouse, where it had 700 capacity and you have 1,600, 2,000 people go through the night, how many names would you have on the list?
On a night like that, you'd probably have somewhere in the area of 75 to 100 people, possibly guest listed. Now, not every person is free. There'll be, let's say there's a percentage. Let's say there's one person, he's got sub people with him. So the first 2 people who are the most important will come in, and then their friends will pay something reduced. So it still keeps your list somewhere between, if you got a night where 1,600 people are gonna show up, Gay Pride 2000, I think it was. Yeah, because it was the new millennium. We had somewhere in the area of about 1,400 people throughout the night. The guest list was like 125 people. But out of that 125 people, at least 40 of those 125 people paid some sort of reduced admission. So it just all depends on what your guest list is attempting to do, because that's always the determining factor. What are we trying to do by providing this service? Because it's a service, just like anything else.
And let's talk numbers. What kind of numbers would you guys make on a night with 1,500 people coming through? Like, what kind of numbers are you doing?
On a night like Gay Pride, because you're paying extra money, you got to think at $15 to $20 a head, and that's before anybody's drank any alcohol. You figure at least 1,300 people. At least 1,250 people are paying the full price at $20 a person.
So that's
then you got
grand out the gate.
Now, mind you, because remember the guest list for even a night like I said, like a Gay Pride 2000, when we had something like 1,400 people. Mm-hmm. In fact, Gay Pride 2000. I'm sorry, because that was 01, but Gay Pride 2000, we actually had 1,600 people throughout the night. The guest list was like 200 and something people, but out of that 200 people, at least 70 of them paid some sort of reduced rate. So at $20 a head, the club's making money, the promoter's making money, the staff makes their money, because there's several people that are involved in this. You're not doing this by yourself. You have to pay your security staff. You have to pay your bartender. Your bartenders are not just paid from the bar. The bar helps pay for the club itself, its usage, its bills. So yes, that actually is a real thing. That's a real thing.
And then what kind of numbers would the bar do if you're doing 25,000 at the door?
The bar, depending on the bar. Now, Uptown obviously drinks are cheaper than being down in Manhattan. But on a night like that, you're talking about somewhere in the area of $30,000 at the bar. Yeah, we're talking about 30, 40 grand. I definitely remember some nights where the owner, his name was Ray Allen. They were definitely doing money drops, and it was somewhere between 18 and 30 grand. They literally taking money out because they couldn't keep all that behind the bar. They had to drop into a safe or something like that. So yeah, so upwards of 30, 35, 40 grand. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're downtown and you have that, you're making up. You have to remember downtown Manhattan. If you have alcohol, because remember Vinyl didn't have alcohol, but if you have alcohol, you're making 75 grand on your bar because they're paying Manhattan prices.
What is a money drop?
A money drop is when you go to the bar. You are basically taking money that the bar has made. You're leaving them cash, obviously, because it's a cash interaction. It's more cards nowadays, but back in the day, we did a lot of cash. There was a lot of loose cash. And even now, there's still a lot of loose cash running around in bars and clubs. You take a portion for safety reasons, believe it or not, and you take a portion of the money that's being made, or they'll come up to the head bartender and say, give me a total. The bar will say, we've made $20,000. Okay, give me 13 grand of that now. They then walk that 13 grand in cash to an area where it can be secured in a safe location until they, and then it's in the safe. Once it's in the safe location, then if something ever happens, whether it's, not that I've been involved in such things, which, because I haven't, I've never been in a place that's actually had like some sort of holdup or something like that. But there's less of a chance of somebody trying to do that, because people generally know that bars keep a certain amount of cash, but they're not, especially at the height of the night, but at some point, they're taking that cash out of the bar and putting it into some sort of safe. In fact, some bars literally just have drop safes. They take a certain amount and it literally goes, it's no longer in the drawer. It just goes into this safe, which is beneath the bar, and it literally is it's almost like a mail drop. You drop it in there, the slot closes, and then it drops into a safe location that can only be unlocked with someone with a key later on. Mm. So yeah, it's done all the time. Vinyl did it. Every club did it. Oftentimes the manager will simply just walk over, how much have you made? And either he'll count it out right then and there, or he takes an amount that's been bound up, so he knows that it's a certain amount of hundreds. And he'll just simply walk with the security person. They'll have a bag, they put it in, and they walk it to the back to a safe area. You know, it just depends on the type of club you're in.
Talk to us about, I want to go back to the guest list.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of game do people run on you or try to run on you to get in? What I'm sure you got stories for days on this.
Yes, anything you can think of. I had a young gay guy that came up to the door of the warehouse and literally said to me, he had a shirt on that was ripped up, and on the back of the shirt, he had on these really tight jeans, and on the back of the shirt, it said, "I'd be mad at me too," and had an arrow pointing down to his ass, and stood there in front of me as if this was supposed to inject, because he stood there, because he was smoking a cigarette, and he turned around so that I could read the shirt and apparently look at the arrow. And after doing that, he then walks up to me and says, "I want to get in." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I've had young ladies who will say, "I'm on," and they'll name a street team leader's list. "No, you're not. Call him." "I can't do that right now. I'm working." "Well, I'm going to call him." And they'll stand there with their cell phone. Now, what's supposed to happen is you are supposed to be impressed, I guess, that they have somebody's number that you probably don't even have, and you really don't need, but we won't talk about that. But, and then they'll stand on the phone, and between them being there, looking the way they look, they're standing on the outside, so people are expecting that you're supposed to treat them better than they're being treated. And this is supposed to be a way to make you nervous. Well, if you don't put me on the list, then my beautiful presence won't be in your club. And of course, the answer to that is there'll probably be someone else after you. And it's not being meant in a mean way, but it's the law of averages. If I got 700-800 people, I'm sure there's more than one or two beautiful women that's going to come in, and they're going to pay, and they're not going to give me this kind of drama. Some people believe that the drama actually will work for them, and in some cases it will. But it just depends on what you're doing, how much time you have, how many people are standing in front of you, and what you want to do to get rid of this annoyance that's right here. You know what I mean? So it just depends on what you're doing. But for the most part, I was never I was never one of those kind of guys. I've always been very I was always very calm, even when things were hectic. I was always able to refer to what my notes had. And then I would make extra notes about the people. And then at the end of the night, after the guest list was closed, go talk to the promoters about the notes I had made so that I could improve it for the next week.
What's a street team?
A street team is when a promoter gets a bunch of people to blanket a certain geographical area with either flyers, whatever print media, or they'll go out and tell people, literally, about the function that's upcoming. They also oftentimes are responsible for making sure that even when they're not telling people, that they're putting their media, their print media, or they are putting up something on the internet, because now everything, not everything, but most things are done over the internet. People do still pound the pavement because there's no better way to get to know people. You have to physically see them. But a street team usually works for a main promoter, and the street team usually designates 1 or 2 people to run 5 or 6 others, and then they go out and go to different geographical areas with the idea that they are going to bring forth people to come to the function.
Talk to us about security. What's the proper way to do club security?
There is no one format. It depends on the circumstances of where you work.
Well, I'll ask it this way then. Describe me a typical night of doing club security. How do you prepare? What does the process entail? How does the night end? What challenges do you deal with? How big is your team?
Okay. Well, I'll start off with preparing. If you're in a hip hop environment, you're going to want to make sure that your gear is relaxed, because you don't want the people, you want the people to feel that you're part of the environment that they're coming into. And that's for any genre, whether it's house, hip hop, reggae, whatever it is. The other thing is, you want to try to make sure that you have both male and female security, just for the purposes of making people feel comfortable. If you are in an environment where there is the potential of danger, have I worked those environments? Of course I have. Have I worn a bulletproof vest? Yes. Do I know guys that wear bulletproof vests all the time? Yes. Have I carried a weapon? Yes. Licensed, by the way. I have done many different situations, from as relaxed as, say, Club Vinyl or the Warehouse, to as uptight as, there used to be a club, hip-hop club in the late 80s called The Underground. It was run by 2 Jews, believe it or not, Mimi and Jerry Rubin. And it was in the Union Square area. And it was when hip-hop was still the Wild West. And I wore a vest. I had gotten my pistol license. I got my pistol license somewhere around 1990. And when I came home from the military, so I was still young, you know, I was 30, you know, early 30s or whatever. And I was strapped and ready for war if need be. The challenges you face, people arguing because either their egos, their personal space they'll feel is invaded. Your job is to try to make sure that they feel welcome, but to make sure that they understand that there are rules and regulations that they don't have any choice but to adhere to if they want admittance to the particular function. Then there's people that pretend to go along with everything that you do just so they can gain entry. And then once they're in, then they want to start to do illegal activity once they're in. I've had to deal with that too. I've worked on the outside at the door. I've worked inside, worked the floor, worked what they call zone security, which is where you have a guy in very specific locations, and they are responsible for seeing things in that particular zone, radioing if they need help. Then of course I've done places where, like at Vinyl, I've done both zone, the door. I'm sorry, 3 different things: zone, the door, as well as doing the floor. Now, when you work the floor, you oftentimes have to physically be there with the people. You physically are there, they're partying, you're walking through them, you're smiling, you're making sure they're having a good time. If they're having any issues, if they see you, they know that you went, hey, listen, such and such, you know, they'll tell you if there's a problem, they'll tell you if there's somebody who's in distress. It's very important, actually, to do the walk through the floor. And I've performed all functions. I've done zone, I've worked the door, I've worked the floor. Oftentimes, it was either, for me, it was never zone. It was either work the door or the floor. At the warehouse, Mike Stone wanted me at the door because he felt that my look would bring people in. He considered me attractive, which is wonderful. I don't have anything against that. But once the guest list was closed, then he would want me inside as well. At some point, once I became exclusively the events liaison and guest list person, I was basically at the door from the time I got the list, go outside. By 3:30 in the morning, I was finished. I was literally having my first drink a half hour before Blue Laws took effect. But at Vinyl, it was either the door or the floor, just depending on what function was going
on. What happened to New York City? It used to be the mecca of nightlife.
Yes.
And then not. What happened?
Gentrification, first and foremost. New York City steadfastly is becoming like Dubai, in that you have an entire population that basically comes here to do the work, and then they're hot-cotting it, which is what they call it, during the week. And then at the end of the week, they go home to their places outside because they can't afford to live in the place that they work. I've been fortunate enough, and a lot of my peers have been fortunate enough to actually stay here and do both. It hasn't come. It's come with its challenges. You move because you want to afford to be able to live comfortable, but you also want to live safe. Nightlife is not cyclical. Nightlife is a reflection of the economics of a city. People work hard, make money, and then they go out to spend it to enjoy themselves where they made money. So in that particular case, that's not cyclical. That's point A to point B. What has happened is that somewhere between A and B, somebody said, I'm going to buy this space and I'm going to have a specific type of people come here. You, who have worked here all this time, you don't have the money I have. You and your kind won't be able to afford to come here. You can go over there, but I'm going to make sure that where I am, the property values are the best, and therefore the resources I'm going to get are going to be the best. Therefore, taking from the smaller place over there. And eventually, the small place over there has to end up paying for the same resources that this guy is putting more money into that they don't have. So they struggle. The place over there closes, and he's left. But now that he's left and the other guy is closed, the people that would have tried to come there, who party or spent their money there, the place is not there anymore, and they don't make enough to spend it where you set up and took away that resource. So what happened in New York City is that there was a break. The middle class is disappearing from New York City. And those of us that are middle class that are still here are in my age bracket. When we do go out, we don't go out every week. And if we did, it's not to go dancing. If we're going out to enjoy music, great. But we're not doing it every week, and therefore we are looking at it from a very different perspective now, because we still have memories of what it was. And we would love to go back to that, but we know we can't. So we have to move on with lives, careers, children, and the like. Younger people coming up have a very different take on nightlife. I don't pretend to know how old you are, Mwema. What are you, your 40s, your 30s?
I'm 16.
Well, in any case, the reason I happen to ask is because the generation behind, not even the generation behind, the generation behind the millennials, because that would be the generation, the young up and coming ones in their early 20s. They see nightlife very differently than Gen Xers like myself see it. I was born and was a fully grown man before the internet came into existence. In fact, I was going into my 30s. In fact, I was in my 30s when the internet came into existence. So I had a very different take on what going out and enjoying myself meant, because you had to take the memory. There was no cameras to take a picture with. There was no camera to run a TikTok video. There wasn't, nobody was walking around with an 8mm camera doing this, unless you were doing it for some sort of news story, or you were doing it for posterity's sake. Oh, I'm going to preserve this. So then you're taking a giant camera, but nobody does that anymore. So the memory has to be solid, because because then you need to relay that to the people that didn't go or couldn't go.
What is Zone 7 Entertainment?
Zone 7 Entertainment was an independent label that I created in response to, it was in response to a couple of things. My age, first of all, how old I was when I was signed to West End. I did not want to be the guy in his mid to late 30s running around to record labels going, please put my record out. Please do this for me. And then end up talking to people that, first of all, that not only that but that you have saved from being drunk, but because of their position at a record label, you end up having to talk to these people to try to get them to, what's the old saying? To put you on. I didn't want to be that guy. After my West End release, which was my third release overall as an artist producer, I went back. My record sold incredibly well, by the way. I went back, but by the time I went back in 2002, Mel Sharon had given up day-to-day control of West End to basically one half of Blaze, Kevin Hedge. Kevin decided he wanted to take West End in a new direction. So he created sub-labels for West End. And even though my contract was different than the contracts that he was currently putting out, my contract was not set up that way because I was signed. Mel signed me. Mel himself signed me. He wanted to make me go through a process as if I was a new artist, and he knew that I wasn't. Meaning he himself. Kevin Hedge knew me. He knew me from before I was signed to West End. He knew me when I worked at Vinyl. He knew me from Zanzibar. He has known me and knew I wasn't a new artist, but then literally wanted me to go through the process as if I was a new artist, even with my record selling well. So in response to that, the production company that the maxi single from West End is signed under is the production company was called Zone 7 Entertainment. I decided to then go public and open up as a record label. So Zone 7 Entertainment became Zone 7 Entertainment LLC. That was in May of 2004. I didn't want it to just simply be a vanity label to just put out my records. I always wanted to expand it beyond whatever I was doing. Now, I was the lead off artist and producer, so the first record off of it, of course, was mine, which was Treble Drums Along the Skyline, the EP in 2005. It was a big hit, which I was very happy about. And then immediately I wanted to make sure that I diversified. So the next record I did, literally the next year, was a compilation EP for the label. So I did a track, I licensed the track from Jus Ed, from Underground Quality. I did a track with a trip hop spoken word artist. I was really trying to give a really diverse, rounded appeal to Zone 7. By the time I was ready to do another record, one of my cousins, believe it or not, his name he calls himself Big U, and for good reason. He's like 6'2½". He is an R&B singer and had a 9-song album already done. The only thing I had to do was mix it, master it, and put it out. We sat down. I talked to him about what I was able to provide. We agreed. He signed a contract. And the first R&B, full-length R&B album I executive produced. In fact, I gave the album its name. The album's called I Feel. And it was moderately successful. It was time for me to do another record in my genre. But before that could happen, because of the licensing I had done with the record in 2006, Jus Ed's wife, Jenifa Mayanja, another superstar DJ, she had this track that she had done and wanted me to write a spoken word record for her track. That song eventually became a song called Imagine If. She's the producer. I am the person that not only wrote, but performed the spoken word piece. It ended up on her Bumako Recordings label, and it's on the Nakusanga EP, the track I'm talking about. And it did very well. In fact, it did so well, I ended up going down to Cabo San Lucas in 2007, shortly after the release of the fourth record, which is the record that T.O. Sweet ended up doing with me, the one he executive produced with me, which is literally called Evolution, the remix project, The Summer Solstice. It's a conceptual house music album. What we did was we basically took almost completed songs that were randomly around that I had done, or ones that were helped being done with other people. We then stripped them down and then reimagined them in a different format. Mm-hmm. I wrote a track called Evolutionary Moments, which is actually based off of the same concept that me and him came up with back in 2000 about renaming to reclaim. I wrote an entire track about it. In fact, both me and T.O. Sweet, under the name The New Soul Giants, perform on the track. And then Jus Ed was like, yo, I like this. So he ends up doing a remix. Then Sweet does his own remix. It just started to germinate into this other thing. And the reason the album got its name, quite literally, Evolution, the Remix Project, because that's literally what it became. And the reason it's got the name The Summer Solstice is because we literally finished the record on June 21st. And by that September, I went to Cabo San Lucas. Ostensibly, it was supposed to be a vacation. But I did a release party on the 4th of September. My birthday is September 7th. I did a release party for the album. And T.O. Sweet DJ'd actually at that party. When I got down to Cabo, the record was already being played in different places. Cabo is a big party place. They had heard the track that I had done by Jenifa Mayanja. In fact, Jenifa got it in rotation on somebody's radio. I don't know whose. And when I got down there, one of the remixes got some airplay in a club. Some DJ who apparently either lived in New York or lived in the greater New York area must have gotten hold of one of them. I walk into a club, not knowing, and I hear it. I walk up to the DJ, I introduce myself, and he's like hearing me, and I said, and I had copies of the record, and initially, of course, he was like, yeah, all right. And I said, no, you really need to play this. And I gave him the record, and he looked, and he was like, oh shit, this is you. I said, yeah. And that's exactly, so I ended up not knowing that my stuff was being played, you know, in Mexico and all these other places in Panama. You know, I was like, really? Oh, wow. So it was starting to work. 2008 came, and me still thinking of the idea of constantly expanding. That very same trip hop spoken word guy that did the open mics, you know, in the East Village. Well, he had done a track on the EP compilation called Fashion of the Flesh. He had come to me with some more stuff that he had written, and he was working with these jazz artists and stuff like that. I was feeling it. I took him back into the studio, and before I knew it, we had an EP called A Different Way of Thinking, because it really was. And the lead-off single was a track called Martinis and Sinners. And we literally took it to Philly, He got on an open mic, got a standing ovation. People started ordering the record like crazy. I thought it was really going to work. And then right on the back of that, my R&B artist had finished up another album. So Big U put out a second album called Simple Pleasures on Zone 7. And it was so good. The Stockmore album was so good. CD Baby, which was my distributor, CD Baby was like, hey, look, we need more. We need more. So now I'm paying my artists. Things are working the way they're supposed to. Then the first Black president gets elected. I'm like, we are really on the way. And then the fiscal crisis hits because Bush Jr. bought out the banks and Obama had to clean up the mess that Bush had. But by that time, Andre Collins and I are in a recording studio and we finish up Madness Part 1. And it's amazing. It's an amazing record. It really is. And we worked really hard on that. And I put it out in January of 2009. But people weren't buying music like they used to, even online, because the economy was horrible. It was beginning of 2009. We were in the throes of one of the worst recessions in U.S. history, even worse than the recession after the stock market crash of '87. We were in a really bad way. So sales plumped. Nobody was buying anything. Thankfully, Andre is a DJ and remixer. He had already done remix records for Rampage Records. He had done a mix CD for a Japanese label. He had tours in Japan. So he was working. So I was thankful. But I also realized the writing was on the wall and people just weren't buying records. I made the fateful decision at the time to end Zone 7, especially since me and my business partner, things just weren't going well for us. They really weren't going well for us, both personally and professionally. So I ended it and I kind of went into a slump. And that slump lasted 2 years, 2.5 years almost. I started feeling better around 2011, 10th anniversary of 9/11. My life was in a different place. Because now I was in my late 40s now. I was starting to get to my mid 40s, excuse me. And I was starting just to have a different perspective on life. And slowly I started trying to put things together, but nothing was really gelling. I didn't have a support system. And then something miraculous happened. The button that you see me wearing is the logo.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, tell everybody what it says.
The button says, "'Cause we can." 'Cause we can is a company that was started by, it's co-run by 5 first cousins. So we have, if you break it down, the C-U-Z is the phonetic way to say the word cousin or cuz. We, because we are, and we are kin, because we are first cousins. All of our mothers and fathers are brothers and sisters. The idea was to take our love. We're all liquor connoisseurs in like high-end bourbons, Scotch. We all have different experiences with it. I'm a bourbon and Scotch man myself, and they asked me about joining this new venture. It was in response to a venture that our aunts and uncles, mothers and fathers, they started, but didn't do it on the level that we, like, for instance, we are a legitimate New York-based LLC with paperwork with the state. We pay taxes and all this stuff. They didn't do all of that. They started a little club, a family club, so they could make money doing parties. Well, we went beyond that. We decided that we wanted to teach people and create the conversations about what people drink and why. And we really wanted to do it for an urban market because people of color don't have those conversations. So we wanted to create them. We started off with advocacy. So telling people about what they drink, what they're drinking, why they're drinking it, and what is best and how, not how they should drink it, because we don't like telling people about what they should drink, but we will tell you about what you are drinking and how we would enjoy it to get the best taste, the best experience out of it, or what we call because we can experience. And because we can experience is about knowing what you drink. My uncle, who used to work at Better Days, see this, because it's, now this part is cyclical. My uncle, who was the head bartender at Better Days, used to say, Lawrence, name it and claim it or they'll give you bullshit. And he's right. That's why there's a top shelf, there's a speed rack, which is under the bar, which is lower grade alcohols, and then there's the mid-range ones. There's a whole science behind it. And because of this, I learned, all those lessons stayed in my head, and they came in handy with my cousins in doing this. We then quickly, it just became a natural progression. We developed our own bar glassware line. We eventually started developing products, alcohol enhancement products. We have our own decanters, our own openers. We have entire liquor sets for people. Then we came up with our own mixes of drinks for people to enjoy based on functions that we had done. We started bottling our mixes at some point. We have an entire online store. And because I'm a musician, because of that inspiration, in 2017, in fact, March 20th, 2017, the day the Winter Music Conference started in 2017, that inspiration got me to go back, go over all the music I had done, and kind of evolve for where I am now. I went back to my jazz roots and did a full-length album called Evolved and In Focus, because they helped refocus me to where I'm going. And I'm very proud of it. I'm incredibly proud of that work. It was something that I worked very hard to come to that point in my life. And it subsequently, the next year, which was 2018 represented the 30th year for me as a producer. So I actually, it actually represented the 31st year, technically. But 1988 to 2018 is 30 years. First record came out in 88. That was 30 years. And what happened is that doing that record in 2017, I said, all right, it's now time to start looking at the future. One of my heroes in music is a jazz trumpeter by the name of Herb Alpert. He did a lot of those songs with Janet Jackson back in the 80s, Keep Your Eye on Me, and Diamonds and Making Love in the Rain. Herb Alpert, a lot of people don't know, He's a jazz trumpeter. He had a band called Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. He eventually became, there was a record label that had a lot of my favorite artists on it called A&M Records, where Herb Alpert is the A in A&M Records. At some point, he sold his interest in A&M because it was time for him to move on. Well, just like that, I also want to get to that point. And here I am now. I'm starting to work on what eventually will become, COVID changed a lot of things, but the working title for the album was supposed to be 32, it was supposed to be called 32 Years Deep, Love and Imperfection by St. Lawrence, because music is imperfect by its nature. But in order to do it and do it well, you have to love it. Kerry Chandler said on one of his greatest hits compilations, "I'm deeply in love with house and you can't lie to it because it knows." And that's a direct quote from him. It's on his Essential Chaos Theory, but I really believe in that. COVID, of course, changed how people record, how things are done. So the album was not going to be ready for release this year. But I have contacted all the people, including bookending with the engineer that I've worked with quite literally for the last 20 years. He's on every record you've ever seen me, with the exception of the West End record. His name is Chris Bliss, and he runs a studio called House of the Rising Sun in the Bronx. I have produced almost every record that I've done for the last 20 years in that studio. He's in my liner notes and everything else. In fact, at one point, we actually were thinking about becoming remix partners. But yeah, we actually did remixes together. At this point, Love and Imperfection is still the working title. And next year will be my 33rd year as a producer. It'll be my 38th year as a professional musician. But I started thinking about the number 33. It's a prime number. It's a very important number. Religiously, allegedly Christ lived for 33 years before, whatever. I wouldn't take it to that realm. It's not a prime number, but it's important enough to explore. And because I have gotten to this point and have been blessed to be able to do this, I have to make sure that I do a record in response to that. And I literally contacted everyone. I sat down and had a conversation with Andre Collins. I talked to T.O. Sweet. I called my engineer. We hadn't been in touch in 2.5 years, but it was good because they said to me, they were like, we should do this. And I said, I literally told my engineer, let's bookend it. Let's do this one last time. Let's complete this 20 years the way it should be. And to that end, I tell people, I say, please stay tuned. St. Lawrence, 33 years deep, 33 years deep. And it's all about love and imperfection.
That's the perfect way to end this interview. That was
all about
great.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, brother. This was a great interview. Thank you so much.